العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا أجمعين وبعد. We continue this morning inshallah ta'ala with Tafsir Surat Al-Saffat. This is the 16th morning of Ramadan. 4 more days from now we'll be looking at the beginning of the last 10 nights of Ramadan and the beginning of our tahajjud program. Once we start tahajjud, which will be Thursday night, the iqamah for Fajr will be 10 minutes after the adhan, because most of the congregation comes for tahajjud, so it's no longer worth waiting the 15 minutes because people are already here. So starting Thursday night, which is Friday morning, the iqamah will be 10 minutes, not 15. So next weekend that will be the case, and the weekend after as well, inshallah ta'ala. Yesterday we stopped at ayah number 98 in the surah, in the middle of the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and it is the main story of this surah, and the story of this surah that the concept or the theme of this surah kind of revolves around. This story is the story that we relive or we recount every year within the second day, 70 days from now, or 75 days or 80 days from now. Once we come closer to Eid al-Adha, we basically recount the steps of Ibrahim alayhi salam within this story that we're going to recite here in this surah. And most of what you do in Hajj, one way or the other, is connected to what we're going to recite this morning as well. This story is of extreme importance and of high significance for us. And being in Surat Al-Saffat, it is talking about the concepts that I've been trying to explain over the course of the last 2 weekends. Ibrahim alayhi salam is going to be told to do something that is absolutely unimaginable. It's unthinkable what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks Ibrahim alayhi salam to do. And we're going to notice a number of elements to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him and how Ibrahim alayhi salam responds to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He gives it to him. So we're going to start reading inshallah ta'ala the verses, maybe up to 104, 105, and then I'll go through the meanings inshallah with you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال إني ذاهب إلى ربي سيهدين رب هب لي من الصالحين فبشرناه بغلام حليم. So after they threw him into the fire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him, and you can see that the verses, they skip or they summarize very quickly the details of this event. This event is detailed in Surah Al-Anbiya elsewhere. But as I pointed out yesterday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the story, or any story in the Quran, will tell us a story multiple times sometimes, looking at it from different angles, focusing within the surah at the part of the story that is relevant to the theme of the surah or the purpose of the surah. And this is why you have the takrar, why the repetition of Qissat Musa alayhi salam and Ibrahim and Lut and Nuh, is because each surah will focus on the theme and the part of the story that is relevant to what the surah is teaching. So for example, the story of Sayyidina Nuh, in Qissat Nuh, it focuses on what Nuh was doing. ثم إني دعوتهم جهارا ثم إني أعلنت لهم وأسررت لهم إسرارا فقلت استغفروا. So you hear Nuh alayhi salam's argument, like how he's trying to defend himself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in depth. You don't hear that in Surah Hud, for example. In Surah Hud, you hear the story regarding the building the ship, and then his discussion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about his son. Like this is what is detailed in Surah Hud, because that's more appropriate for what the theme of the surah actually is. And this is this is where the beauty of learning the Quran comes in my opinion at least. I find this absolutely fascinating. If you just learn to see the differences between stories, what's emphasized in one surah and what's not emphasized in the other, you'll start to pick up on things. You'll start to pick up on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to get you to focus on. Because the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam is in the Quran multiple times. the only place where it talks about this story is here. This is the only time that he talks about it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because this is where he's emphasizing this part of the story. Think about this part. He will build up to it. Like he'll tell you the basics. He'll go through the basics of what happened in the story and what happens later in some degree of summary. But he'll detail one piece. And this is everywhere. And even the subtle differences that you'll find, for example, between the stories of Musa and Shu'ara, for example, and Araf. Right? Even those the differences, those differences or subtle differences are actually meaningful. Like they're purposeful. They're mutashabihat for the huffaz, but there's actually a reason of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use certain terminology in one surah and a different in others. Same thing for Qissat Adam alayhi salam ma Iblis. Certain things are emphasized and certain things are left out in other surahs. You just have to develop a little bit of it's not a sixth sense, it's just the ability to see those differences, to appreciate what he left out and what he added in another surah, and then contemplate, well, why is he focusing on this here? When you contemplate that or you think about it, you'll inshallah conclude some of the points that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to think about. So here, after Sayyidina Ibrahim was thrown into the fire, he doesn't really tell us what happened in the details of what occurred. It was khalas, it was quick. You can find those details in Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Anbiya if you want. But he made it. He didn't die. They wanted to harm him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them the inferior, and he made it alayhi salam. And he said, "Inni dhahibun ila rabbi sayahdin." So he said, I am going to my Lord. I'm in search of the word of my Lord. Dhahibun is implying that he left. He didn't stay where he was. He didn't stay in Babylon. He didn't stay in Mesopotamia or in Iraq, where he was born. He had to leave. So this is his first hijrah, alayhi salam. And no one wants to leave their country of where they were born. But he had to leave, alayhi salam, because he was not welcome there anymore. So he says, Inni dhahibun ila rabbi. I'm on my way to my Lord. Sayahdeen, he will guide my footsteps. He will guide me on my way. Rabbi habli min as-salihin. My Lord, grant me a son, a companion, that is from salihin, who is pious. And this is the dua of every father and every mother, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them a progeny that will follow in the footsteps of khair and salah and piety and goodness. Because one of the worst experiences a person can have in their lives is having a child that goes in the wrong direction. One of the most difficult things a person can go through. One of the hardest experiences, and it's a heartbreaking endeavor that you never really ever get over. A person who raises a child that does not obey and does not show birr and does not wahid Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not come out saying la ilaha illallah and live that course. It's very difficult and it's very hurtful. So this is the dua that you should make. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Allah grant us from ourselves and from our spouses that which will be the cool of our eye. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Allow us to be role models in the way we live. So he said, رَبِّ هَبْ لِي مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him this. Between ayah number 100 and 101 was roughly 4 decades. All right, so we're reading, it's just 2 ayahs. But between these 2 verses, between him saying, Rabbi habli min as-salihin, oh Allah, grant me offspring that will be pious, and Allah saying, فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ, and then we gave him the good news, بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ, of a forbearing or a patient. Al-hilm is patience. A patient son, someone who will, has an attribute of patience. Between these 2 verses, it took us 30 seconds to read them, 40 years. 40 years. We need to understand the concept of time in the eyes of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. Time to us is different than time. We are خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَجَلٍ. The human being was created in a sense of wanting things immediately. Mustajil, ajal, he wants it now. He wants it now. No, not later. Not next year, not next week. I'm going to make dua, I want it to happen now. No patience at all. That's why بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ. The son he was granted, alayhi salam, was patient. Why? Because he was, alayhi salam. Because he was patient. Because when he made this dua, هَبْ لِي مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, it took him 40 years. Some scholars say it was longer than that. I'm giving the moderate number. I'm giving the moderate number of when he was granted Ismail, alayhi salam. He was going to be granted Ishaq way later. When he says فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ عَلِيمٍ later on in Surah Al-Dhariyat, this is going to happen way later. The Anbiya are going to come and talk to him about this. And he's even going to say, بَشَّرْتُمُونِي عَلَىٰ أَن مَّسَّنِيَ الْكِبَرُ فَبِمَ تُبَشِّرُونَ. You're giving me this good news. I'm an old man now. What good news is this? I'm 90. Why do I want a child at 90? This is Ishaq alayhi salam. Right? He was granted Ishaq at the end of his life. But Ismail came to him at some point, maybe in his 40s or 50s, from Sayyidah Hajar, because he and Sarah. So Ibrahim alayhi salam married when he left Babylon. He left with himself, his wife, and his nephew. His nephew is Lut alayhi salam. And Lut alayhi salam was granted prophecy and was sent to Sodom. His wife Sarah, who was his cousin, he was married to her, and they stayed married for the rest of their lives. They lived together for, some scholars say, up to 90 years, because they both lived beyond 100. And they didn't have children. The only child that they had was Ishaq. And Ishaq came very, very late. فأقبلت امرأته في صرة فصكت وجهها وقالت عجوز عقيم. When the two angels came and told her, you're going to have a child, she went like this, في صرة, and then she slapped her face and she said, عجوز, I'm old, aqim, and I don't bear children. I'm going to have a child now in my 80s. I don't understand. But she was pregnant and she gave birth to Ishaq. And subhanAllah, this is a different story, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But Ismail did not come from Sarah alayhi salam. Ismail came from Hajar alayhi salam. And this happened, we know that this happened a long time after he left Babylon. Because he went from Babylon to Sham, to Palestine, back to Sham, then to Egypt, and then down to and then to Mecca. So it was in Egypt that he was granted Hajar. So it took him. This whole story took 4 decades of life. So when you make a dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you the answer for it, make sure that you don't allow time to make you forget it. Make you forget that you made this dua before, because it took a long time. Because between ayah, number 100 and 101, is for us maybe 3 words, but for Ibrahim was 4 decades of life. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him he responded to Ibrahim, and he granted him a son. It took a while, but he granted it. And the son he granted him was of the nature of what Ibrahim alayhi salam showed through that time, which was patience. So he was granted a son who was patient. All right, we'll continue. فلما بلغ معه السعي قال يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك فانظر ماذا ترى قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. فلما أسلما وتله للجبين وناديناه أن يا إبراهيم قد صدقت الرؤيا إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out here, a lot of things happen. Again, the story is kind of going through quickly, arriving at the point that it wants to emphasize. Things are happening in the meantime. Ibrahim alayhi salam is granted prophecy within this time. He marries Hajar. He has a child, Ismail alayhi salam. He is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, take Ismail and go down down south to a place where there are no resources. The people don't live there. He drops Hajar alayhi salam with her few-day-old child, Ismail, in the middle of nowhere. يَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. I put them in a valley that there's no green there. Nothing is growing there. In the بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ, where your holy house exists. And this is evidence that Ibrahim alayhi salam knew of the existence of the Kaaba there way before Ismail grew up and he was told to build it. Because people don't seem to comprehend that the Kaaba is the first house that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on the planet. It predates Ibrahim. From the time of Adam alayhi salam and even predates Adam alayhi salam. So when Ibrahim was sent there to put Ismail, he knew why. He knew what was there. He knew that this is where the Kaaba is going to be rebuilt again. So he knew that piece. It's just he was disappointed to see how uninhabitable the area was. Now this was not a place it was not a kind place on the planet. There was no zara, there was nothing green there. So he left Ismail, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the known story would put at the foot of Ismail alayhi salam with the barakah of the wing of Jibreel, Zamzam, and from Zamzam the mother would drink, and Ismail would find nourishment. And the Arab, Jurhum, who had suffered a destruction of all of their crops and all of their land because of the ruining of a dam, one of said Ma'rib, they had to leave. And they went north looking for a better place to live. And they were going north. Their goal was to make it as far as Sham because there was just more resources in the north. Living in the desert is not fun and it's not easy. And people look for other options. The people of the desert, they look for options, and what they're looking for really is water. That's all. If you find water, then you can live. The Ahl al-Sahra, the people of the desert, they have the skill set. They know how to manage living in such difficult climate. However, they require a body of water somehow. So when they saw the vultures or the birds around in the sky, they knew that there was a body of water. That they went, they found Zamzam, and they would ask permission. They had some degree of honor and integrity and nobility, and they paid Hajar, because it was her water, to live beside it, and they lived beside it for years, and that's how Hajar lived. That's how she made money. It was from the rent for using the Zamzam. And Ismail alayhi salam would grow up amongst the Arab, and he would grow. As a child, all he knew was the people he grew up amongst, and he married into them alayhi salam, which is why the Arab al-Musta'riba are the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam. The Arab that are not originally Arab, but became Arab, are the Arab that come from Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Every descendant of Ibrahim is a Hebrew, just by definition. Every descendant of Ibrahim is a Hebrew. Whether the descendant is coming from Ishaq or is coming from Ismail, it doesn't make a difference. When you say Hebrew, you're referring to the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is not up for debate. It's not up for debate historically. It's not up for debate politically. Yeah. So for Hebrews to be defined as only the sons of Ishaq and not the sons of Ismail is not only historically stupid, it is wrong. Like, aside from the fact that they're stupid, how is it that you're a Hebrew if you're the progeny of the younger son but not a progeny of the first son? The Arab and the Yahud are all Hebrews. They all come from Ibrahim alayhi salam. At least the majority of them do. The majority of both followship come from this background. Ahl Filastin, humma min qaba'il Bani Zayd. They come from today they're descendants of the tribes of Banu Zayd. Banu Zayd are amongst, they're Adnanite tribes. They're tribes that descend from Adnan, which is from Mudar bin Nizar. So those of them who descend from the Prophet ﷺ, which are a number of them, the rest of them are all descendants, are al-Mudari. They're all from Mudar. So these are all Hebrews. They're living in the land of their forefather, of their grandfather, ﷺ, Ibrahim. So when they are removed when you use the argument that you need to remove them to let the Hebrews live there, the degree of dumbness that is involved in this argument is so complex that you don't even know where to begin. How are you removing the children of Ismail to put in the children of Ishaq? That's how this is going to work. You're not removing people who have no lineage. These are people who live here because they are descendants of it. Imam al-Shafi'i was born in Gaza. He was born في Gaza, and then he was sent to Mecca for education. And then he moved around, and he was born in Gaza because Banu Hashim, but most of Banu Hashim, after Islam spread, they moved around, and a lot of them moved to the Holy Land. They moved to Al-Quds and what's around Bayt al-Maqdis and parts of modern-day Palestine. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعْهُ السَّعِي. Once his son grew up to the point where he was able to perform sa'i with him. Sa'i means he's dependable. It's that age where a father becomes a little bit more proud of his son. He looks at his son, and there's some degree of coolness in his eye as he looks at his son, who is a strapping young man who can carry things and do stuff, and he's helpful. At the age of 3 and 4, they're just a burden. You have to dress them and put them in the seat and then take them out again, and they're annoying. But at a certain age, they're helpful. So they're helpful too. So not only do you love them, but now they're also carrying a little bit of a burden off your shoulders. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعُ السَّعِي, which is the time where father will love his son the most. قَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ أَنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was a prophet, would see a vision in his dream. He would see himself with a knife going for the neck of his son Ismail. He woke up the first night in absolute horror. Deep down inside, he's hoping that this is just adghathu ahlam. And shaitan is bringing him something. So he waits. He sleeps the next night, he sees it again. Now he's getting concerned. The third night, he doesn't want to sleep anymore because he's afraid of what may happen. Because if he sees it the third night, then he knows what the drill is. He sleeps the third night, he sees the exact same ru'ya again. So now he knows that this is no longer a suggestion. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wahi, his revelation, that he has to slaughter his son. At the time, his only son. A son who he waited a long time for when he made the dua, right? 40 years until he had him. He doesn't have another one. And he's at an age where Ismail alayhi salam is ready for marriage, and he's proud of his son. He's told to slaughter his son. If you follow Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, you find that Ibrahim is a very argumentative person. Like he's always arguing, which is why these verses at the beginning kind of existed. The reason, and I didn't talk about that then, I want to talk about now, so we can go back. So what I recited with you yesterday, I didn't go into the details, but look how Ibrahim alayhi salam is arguing. ماذا تعبدون أئفكا آلهة دون الله تريدون فما ظنكم برب العالمين ألا تأكلون ما لكم لا تنطقون أتعبدون ما تنحتون والله خلقكم وما تعملون. These are all just verses Ibrahim arguing. Where is his argument here? Isn't this something worth arguing? If anything was worth having an argument over, wouldn't this be one? Wouldn't this be the one that he should argue? He's being told, slaughter your 14, 15, 16-year-old son with your own hand. There's no argument of Ibrahim alayhi salam. You see, Ibrahim alayhi salam knew what was worth arguing. What was worth فَلَمَّا أَجَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ رَأَى كَوْكَبًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. He goes to الملك يعني ربي الذي يحيي ويميت قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب ربي أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى. The Quran is filled with Ibrahim alayhi salam arguing and asking and questioning and critically appraising, like on and on and on everywhere. Ibrahim alayhi salam is like he is the person who I use as an example of critical thinking and questioning things. And then Allah tells him, slaughter your son. Not a word. Not a word. Not one argument. Nothing. This is what you have to notice in the Quran. He does not make an argument. He does not ask a question. He doesn't turn, Ya Rab, no, why? Just explain why, and I'm good. I just want to know why am I going to slaughter an innocent 15, 16-year-old boy, my son. What about me? Just explain why, and I'll do it. No, doesn't ask. He knows. This is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not questionable. This is not debatable. See, this is the peace. This is the peace. This is why ayah number 103, what? فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا. Aslam is to submit, which is the whole point of this cluster of surahs. It's not just the surah itself. Is submission, is obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is giving up your will for His. What, he wasn't Muslim before? No. He was Muslim before, and so was Ismail alayhi salam. They were both Muslim. But here, فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا, it means that they fully submitted, because this was a hard one. This was not easy. Not only did Ibrahim have questions, When Ismail was told by his father, Ya bunay, oh my son, indeed I am seeing in my vision that I am slaughtering you. فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. So look, think, what do you think? Like, what is your opinion on this? قَالَ يَا أَبَتِ فَعَلْ مَا تُؤْمَرْ. My father, do what you were commanded to do. If this is what you're commanded to do, because Ismail was educated, he understood prophecy. He was being prepared to become a prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, himself. واذكر في الكتاب إسماعيل إنه كان صادق الوعد وكان رسولا نبيا وكان يأمر أهله بالصلاة والزكاة وكان عند ربه مرضيا. Ismail alayhi salam was a full messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knew that what a dream meant, what a vision meant. He knew that this was a command. So his response was, oh my father, do what you were commanded to do. Ismail didn't seem to question things either. ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. You're going to find me amongst those who are perseverant. I will persevere. If this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you to do, then I'll do it. Because they both understand what it meant to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submit. This is the point of this surah. The point of this surah is this verse and what it entails. They didn't question. They didn't argue. This is what Allah commanded. They had certainty that this was Allah's command. This is important, by the way. This is a piece that I forgot to point out to you. When you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding something of ghaib or something that you don't understand the wisdom of, make sure that that was His command. Just make sure you have certainty that that is His command subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you have certainty that that is His command, you follow. You submit to that will. You submit to it and you question none of it. But if you're uncertain if this is Allah's command, ask. You turn to scholars to ask, is this actually what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do? If it is, I accept. I just want to make sure that it's correct. Ibrahim he had to wait for 3 nights to make sure that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't see it once in his dream and then go slaughter his son. He had to wait to make sure that this is Allah's command subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for you the same thing. Sometimes I heard that this is fard. You heard. Your heard is not enough. Who did you hear it from? You need to make sure that you are properly educated, that you are you're attending sessions of knowledge seeking and you are being taught appropriately that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, and you understand the evidence behind it. But once that is established, خلاص, Aslam, you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا. And when they both fully submitted to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. And he pulled him up and situated his, al-jabin is the forehead, on the slaughtering stone. You'll see it in Mina. You can go to where this happened, to where Ibrahim alayhi salam did this. See, the jamarat that you throw the stones on in Hajj was just when Ismail and Ibrahim and his mother Hajar were walking towards the slaughtering stone. And Shaitan, for the life of him, could not understand why no one's asking any questions here. He just can't handle it. Where is you have no questions at all about this. None of you? All 3 of you. Not one of you has a question to ask? No one's wondering maybe why we're slaughtering a 15-year-old boy? That's it? We're good with it? No questions? So he comes to Ibrahim. What are you doing? When mukhak? What are you doing? This is your only son. What did he do wrong? Why are you slaughtering your son? Ask God why he wants you to do this. So he starts throwing this poison into Ibrahim alayhi salam. He comes in the form of a creature, not just waswasa for this story. So Ibrahim alayhi salam picks up 7 pebbles and he starts ruh min hon, get out of here. So he leaves Ibrahim. He comes to Ismail. What is your dad doing? He's lost it. The old man has lost it. He's going to slaughter you. Why would he slaughter you? He can slaughter himself. He's an old man. Why you? What did you do? You haven't even seen the world yet. You haven't lived yet. You're not even married. Ismail does the same thing. So he comes to Hajar, the mother. Shu zawjik kharraf. What's your husband doing? How many children do you have? This is the only son that you have. You're going to let your both of them are insane. What are they doing? Have you no heart? Do you not love your child? The same thing. So when you go to the Hajj, you will throw the 3 stones, walking in the footsteps of Ibrahim and Hajar and Ismail, as Shaitan tried to get them to question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a command that they didn't understand. They did not understand the command. They didn't understand it. They had no comprehension of why this was needed at all. At all. I mean, there's no way to explain this. But they did it. And Ibrahim alayhi salam took tallahu lil jabin. He pulled him and put his forehead on the slaughtering stone. And he pulled the knife, and he put the knife on, and Ismail's face was upwards first of all, and then Ismail said, no, turn my face down, because I don't think you can do this if you're going to look at me. I don't want to do that. I don't think it's proper. It's not going to work that way. Put my face down. So they put the face down. And he took the knife, and he struck. This is how far this story went. So you don't think that somehow in the middle of it he was bailed out. No. He took the knife was sharpened, and he struck with the knife. It's just when he struck with the knife that he's used to striking with. Ibrahim slaughters animals, kharoof and baqar, to eat all the time. Back then, this was a very, we're not used to doing this because Costco takes care of it for us. But as far as the rest, but back then, no, you would do this. So Ibrahim ﷺ knows how to use a knife, and this is not the first time that he's done this. He knows exactly where to hit. He knows where the jugular and the carotid are. So once he knows how to hit this quickly and swiftly and end it. So he strikes appropriately with the knife. He hits his son with his knife. Imagine that moment. Imagine the moment of him hitting. Imagine this moment. You can't imagine this moment because this moment is unimaginable. Because you can't imagine this. You can't think about this. This is the most difficult thing of all time. How do you do this? How could you possibly do this? وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ. And we called upon him, O Ibrahim, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. Indeed, you saw through the vision that we gave you. إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Indeed, this is how we treat those of excellence. What's happened so far? What happened so far is he's struck and nothing has happened. That he struck hard with a very sharp blade. He spent time sharpening the blade because he didn't want Ismail to suffer. And he struck him with a sharp blade, but nothing happened. Not even a dent in Ismail's skin. Nothing. He is called, indeed, Ibrahim, you have seen through the vision. You've seen the vision through إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This is how we reward those who show excellence. إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُوَ الْبَلَاءُ الْمُبِينُ. وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. سَلَامٌ عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ نَبِيًّا مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. وَبَارَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ وَعَلَى إِسْحَاقَ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِهِمَا مُحْسِنٌ وَظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ مُبِينٌ. Allah says, indeed, this is the true trial. This is the overwhelming trial. This is the overburdening test in life. This is the bala al-mubin. This was the clear and obvious, difficult test when he was given. وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. And we ransomed Ismail alayhi salam with a great kharoof. Dhibh is a kabsh, a sheep, sent down by Jibreel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Ibrahim to see through the vision. And he slaughtered this kabsh and he fed his family and he fed others. Because there was no purpose of this command, it didn't go through. Because there was no purpose of this command, it didn't go through. There was no wisdom of Ibrahim killing his son. There's no wisdom behind it. And because there was no benefit and there was no wisdom, there was no reason, it didn't happen. But the point of the story is that when Allah commands you, you submit and you do it. Regardless of whether you understand or you don't, you do it. And remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never told you to do something that was harmful to you. He never commanded you to perform an action that was going to be non-beneficial. He only commanded you to do things that were helpful to you. So be thankful. That's why we have Eid. That's why we perform Eid. Lak alhamd ya Rabb, that you only commanded us that which was helpful and beneficial to us. Not once did you tell us to do something or anything that was going to be harmful. But Ibrahim alayhi salam stands as the example of someone who was commanded to do something that made absolutely no sense. There was absolutely no wisdom. He couldn't see anything in it. But because Ibrahim understood the nature of relationship between the abd and the khaliq, he submitted and he did not argue. And there's nowhere in this ayat that Ibrahim alayhi salam even once turned to the sky and say, what's the deal? Not once. He saw the vision, he goes, he does it. He sees it through. صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا. He does exactly what the ru'ya told him to do. He's step by step. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for the blood of Ismail. There's no need. It's just the story. It's just the establishment of submission. Ibrahim had to prove that he was willing to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, whether he understood why or he didn't. Because if you're only going to submit whether you understand, this is not the proper relationship. That's not submission. Because you don't always have the ability to understand everything. As a human being, I don't have the capacity to have knowledge about everything. Some things He will command me subhanahu wa ta'ala, I may not comprehend, but as long as I know that He commanded me to do it, I will do it. And I'll figure out why later. Or He'll tell me why Yawm al-Qiyamah. I'm happy with it either way. Knowing that He never commanded you to perform something that's harmful. And when He told Ibrahim to do something that was not beneficial, it didn't happen. It didn't occur. And every year we celebrate this. We celebrate standing and say, Ya Rabb, lak alhamd. We were never told to do something non-beneficial. Slaughter your kabsh, have your meat and feed others and rejoice in the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you never had to do anything that made no sense. وَلَوْ أَنَّا كَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ ولو أنا كتبنا عليهم أن اقتلوا أنفسكم أو اخرجوا من دياركم ما فعلوه إلا قليل منهم ولو أنهم فعلوا ما يوعظون به لكان خيرا لهم وأشد تثبيتا وإذا لآتيناهم من لدنا أجرا عظيما ولهديناهم صراطا مستقيما. And had we told them to kill yourselves or leave your land uselessly, they wouldn't have done it. These are non-beneficial commands. But we never told them. But had we told them to do things that had no benefit to them, none of them would have done it. So why don't you just do what we've told you to do that is beneficial? Do that. And if you do that, then we will grant you khair, and we will grant you strength, and we will grant you a sirat mustaqim, and we will give you ajr. We only commanded you that which is beneficial to you. He could have told us to do something harmful, but He didn't. The point of this story, He didn't. Ibrahim alayhi salam is the epitome of a person who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why He called us Muslimin, because he aslam. He submitted his will. He didn't understand the wisdom why he had to slaughter his son. Ismail didn't understand the wisdom of why he needed to be slaughtered. Hajar didn't understand why this was happening. But they all accepted La ilaha illallah, so they submitted to His will. And they allowed it to be. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for the blood of a child. فَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. We left Ibrahim's good good reputation to continue amongst people. Salamun ala Ibrahim, peace be upon Ibrahim. كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This is how we reward those who show excellence. إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He's amongst our believing servants. وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ. And after this we gave him the good news. Another 50 years. Between this and وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ, another 50 years. Just so you understand. Just so that if you're in a hurry for Him to respond to you, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Between this and between Ishaq, 5 decades. The first one was 4, this 5 decades. وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ, 5 decades later. نَبِيًّا مِّنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. He was granted as reward for that, Nabi Ishaq. وَبَارَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ وَعَلَى إِسْحَاقَ. And Allah granted barakah upon Ismail and upon Ishaq. وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِهِمَا. And from the progeny and the genealogy and the lineage of both, muhsinun, people who are good. وَظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ مُبِينٌ. And people who are oppressors, who are clear oppressors from both lineages. We'll end with that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله